TipTut.
Hello everybody and welcome back to TipTut, and welcome back to the first tutorial associated with the Big 100 project. Now, if you don't know what that is, go away and find out. It's pretty cool. You may have missed the boat if you're watching this a bit later on, but never mind. If you don't know what it is, it's not a problem. You can still follow this tutorial. It's just part of a competition that I'm doing. So if you fancy winning some stuff and doing some cool collaborations, then make sure to check out the Big 100 project video on my channel. However, for all intents and purposes, this is a how to create an animated GIF tutorial in Animate CC. I'm using a graphics tablet. You don't have to. You can use a mouse, although I'd recommend getting one because they're brilliant, and you can only get them around 20 quid now, I think, because you can get from 20 quid all the way up to a couple of grand in price, so they're very, very accessible at the base level, and they basically allow you to draw on a screen with a pen as opposed to using a mouse, so you get pressure sensitivity and stuff like that. Anyway, that's enough babble. Let's jump right in. I'm going to create a new ActionScript 3 document inside of Animate CC. If you are very brand new to Animate CC, don't worry. I've got a series called Intro to Animate CC on my channel. You can check that out. Make sure it's the 2018 version. But we won't be going too much into how to use the entire system for this anyway, as we're just doing a quick animated GIF tutorial. Now, for my Big 100 project, I'm going to be bringing in a JPEG here. And the aim of this project is essentially to draw over this JPEG, animate it, and create a GIF. You can obviously do whatever you want. I'm just going to be using this as a base for the project. Now, for those taking part of the project, you would obviously drag your block of content in here. For those who aren't taking part, it really doesn't matter. You can do this regardless of whether you're part of the competition or not. So we need to make sure that our canvas size is the same size as our image that we've dragged in. For this one, it's 216 by 384 pixels. So I'm just going to right click and choose document. And then I'm going to change it from 1920 by 1080 to 216 by 384. Like so. That will make our canvas size the same size as our image, and then we can just position this image by clicking and dragging on the center of our stage. In our layers palette up here, I'm just going to lock that and create a new layer on top. In fact, let's go mad and create a few. Like so, okay? Now, you may be having a bit of trouble getting started if you're doing this for the competition, and I suggest, if you are, using a cool website called coolers.co. What this does is it allows you to press the spacebar and you can generate a 5-part color palette, which is really cool. This one is really nice. It will just randomly generate them. If you like some, you can lock them and it will keep those and generate a color palette that fits that. But if you're struggling with where and how to start, this might be a good way to do so. In fact, this is pretty good. I like this palette. So what I'm going to do is just grab these and I'm going to copy their codes. Go into Animate CC, grab my brush tool, and I'm just going to create myself a little color palette. So I'll create a layer called CP, and underneath my brush tool fill here, I'm just going to paste my hex code in there and just draw a little splodge so that I can sample that later. Then I'm just going to quickly do the same with the rest of these colors. So we'll go and grab this lighter purple here, draw a little splodge like so, and do the same with the rest. So a brief explanation then. What we're going to be creating today is a very short, sort of half-second long animation that loops. Okay, so the first frame and the last frame are going to be the same thing, and it's going to endlessly loop. We're going to export it as a GIF from Animate CC so that we can upload it to the internet, and it will loop continuously, and it's not in the outdated Swift format which Animate and Flash are previously known for. So, last color, like so. The things we're going to learn inside this tutorial are how to manipulate the shapes inside of Animate and how to create frames and layers and things like that. Like I said, if you're brand new to Animate, I'd suggest watching my Intro 2 series before this one if you are interested in learning precisely how the details of Animate CC works as a program. Okay, great. So we've got our little color palette there. I'm just going to lock that away. And now I can use this when I'm selecting my colors later on to choose the different colors that I want for my blocks of my content. So this timeline up here represents the space in time that our animation will take. and it's set to be at the moment 24 frames per second, which means that if I were to create 24 frames of content, like so, then this, when played, would last a second before looping back to the beginning. There's a few shortcuts you should be aware of. These are F5, F6, and F7. F5 will create a new frame wherever you click and extend that content out, basically duplicating what is ever in the frame before it. F6 will create a new keyframe, allowing you to change what is currently on the screen. So if I drew something here, for example, with my pen, and then I moved over to this keyframe here, that would disappear, okay? F7 will create a new blank keyframe, which is empty. So if I color this in, you can see, for example, up here, that this keyframe is filled in, this keyframe is empty. Again, rushing through that a little bit because I've covered this all in another different series. So this is really going to be how to create specifically something as like an animated GIF. Let's zoom in slightly then. So we're going to do all of this frame by frame because I think that's kind of nice. And what we're going to do is just drag a load of frames out and hit F5, and that gives us a little bit of time to work with here. I'm going to call a layer here star, and I'm going to pick one of my yellow colors like so, and go back to my brush tool with B. Now at the moment I don't have pressure sensitivity turned on, so what I need to do is just hit these little buttons here for pressure and tilt, and that allows me to just increase or decrease the size of my brush depending on how hard I'm typing. Okay, so I'm going to select this yellow here, like so, grab my brush tool, and I'm basically, just for now, going to color over this star. Okay, like so. That didn't work because I wasn't on the right layer. There we go, awesome. I'm going to make sure that I'm on my first frame so I just know what I'm working with, like so, and I'm pretty happy with that. So, around this star, I'm going to draw maybe a few little lines of light, because these look good when they wobble about, like so. Okay, now that's going to be one frame in our picture. If we then want to animate this, we need to create new frames as we go along further. So skip a frame and hit F7 on the third frame of our timeline here, and I'll create a new blank keyframe. The reason I'm doing this in twos is because if you skip a frame, it just looks nice and it saves me work. You can, of course, if you want to, animate one on every frame of your timeline. But I can't see what I've previously drawn, which can be quite distracting. So what we need to do is turn on the onion skin, which is these two boxes here, like so, and that will show us a brief ghost of what our previous frame looked like. If we want to, we can hide and lock these layers for now. We can zoom in a little bit more, and essentially I'm just going to make this star sort of sit there and flicker. So I'm going to be trying to not completely replicate it each time, because the whole point is it's supposed to flicker a little bit, but roughly, and I do mean roughly, just briefly go over those shapes that I made last frame. Okay, so now you can see that we get a little bit of flicker. If I turn the onion skin off, it's a bit easier to see. Our little star starts to blink in the moonlight. Now, if we carry on like so, I can actually just create a number of blank frames here in preparation. I'm going to do that all the way up to 1 second, which would actually be here, okay, on frame 24. Now on frame 25, because I know this isn't actually going to be part of my animation, that's where it's going to start looping, I'm going to copy and paste my first frame. And the reason for this is when I start drawing this frame here, it may be that as we draw over time, I'm going to migrate and this is going to start squashing and stretching and looking a bit weird. If we make sure that we sort of work forwards a bit and then work backwards a bit, we can make sure it's going to loop smoothly by the time it comes to the end of this animation again. So for example, I can go and try and follow this as close as I can. So you can see that I missed a bit at the bottom, so I can just fill that in. I missed a bit at the top, and I can just fill that in. Now, the reason we do it this way is that we know for a fact that this is pretty close to what we started with. Just filling in like so. And what that means is, as long as each frame we do is pretty close, when it hits that end and goes back to the beginning, they're not going to be quite so jarring, other than the fact that I seem to have accidentally moved. Yeah, I've accidentally moved my star there by not pasting it in place. So let me just paste that in place there instead of just pasting. And we'll use the onion skin to just reposition these quickly. So the only mistake I made there was I didn't hit paste in place when I hit paste, and that just put it to the center of this box rather than to where it was before. So you can see that this frame and this frame, pretty much exactly the same, okay? There we go, like so. So now I know I can remove these. And remove this one as well. Which means that when this frame hits and we go back to the first, it's not going to be incredibly different, which means that it should loop pretty seamlessly. So all I'm going to do now is just using my brush tool. I'm just literally going to go through and keep doing this until my star is completely animated. And I won't make you sit through this because it could take a little while. So instead, what I'm going to do is just fast forward through this segment quickly. Okay, so just filling in the last frame here, making sure that now that I can see my before and after frames, I'm just kind of roughly drawing those in between the two so that it's not too jarring when it jumps about. Okay, so just filling these in like so, making sure that it looks smooth-ish, and there we are. So let's hit play on this, and we can see here's our star doing a little bit of breathing in the sky. Now it's hard to get a sense of that if we don't loop it. So if we just hit the loop button here, and what we can do is just drag our loop out to the 1 second, and we can just look that and watch it as it goes. Okay, so immediately I can see there's a bit of an issue on one of these frames where it hasn't quite filled in this gap here. So we can go to that frame like so, and we can just quickly fill in that gap. Other than that, that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. So let's zoom out, and we can see that our first part of our animation is done. Now, essentially, that is it. We're just going to duplicate and keep doing this again and again until we've got our finished response. Now, do keep watching because I'll do some different techniques and I'll show you how to draw lines that aren't there. So we're going to move and morph some of the parts of the sky in this. But if you're happy to just sort of dive in now with that little bit of knowledge, great, go right ahead. Otherwise, I'm going to carry on and keep doing the similar thing. What I'm going to do first, though, is the rest of the stars and fast forward through that because it's literally the same process. So there's no point in you watching me do that slowly for the next 20 minutes. Okay, so we're just going to go through and do the rest of these stars here. This one I might do a little bit different because perhaps it's off the edge, but we'll see. Maybe I'll do it the same. I might pick a different color for each star as well. So I'll see you on the other side. Just quickly, one thing you might find easier is to do things by parts. So for example, I could do the center of my star over and over again. So drawing in the body of the star like so, using the comma and full stop keys to go back and forth here, like so. And you might find this works a little bit quicker and is a little bit easier because there's less distractions. Okay, so we know, for example, if we loop this, that's going to play just fine. Yep, we can check that we're happy with that section of it. Just make sure that that itself isn't the same image. Yeah, that seems pretty good. So what we can do now is just come in and draw the rest of these. We go back to our first frame on the same layer, and we can draw in maybe a couple of these and move over and do a couple of these. Again, we can copy what we have here, paste it in place here on the last frame, and then make sure that we align ourselves properly. So you can do things bit by bit, essentially. It's completely up to you, however you like working. Okay, so there are our 3 blinking stars. Pretty happy with those, and you kind of understand the concept now. You redraw trying to stay roughly similar each time, and it gives it a sort of twinkling in place motion. Next up is doing this other star, which I might try a little bit differently. I'm going to try and have him sort of spludge in and out a bit. Each of these is going to be kind of like a liquid piece of sky. Now, if you're doing this for the Big 100 project, it's important to note that the in and out points probably shouldn't change because that might affect what happens in the next picture, but all of this stuff in the middle is free to play with. So we're going to jump in and do that. Okay, so this one is up next then. And like I said, as long as you follow the rough lines on the in and out points, it doesn't really matter what else we do with it. So we'll call this one star blob because I'm not sure whether I wanted it to be a star or a blob of sky as there was in the original image. And what I'm probably going to be thinking of doing is this color here, this sort of dark purple, is going to be this area of sky, okay? Then this bit's going to be this kind of darker green, and then this bit's going to be purple again, and this star is going to be lighter green, so we're going to try that. Going to grab this here, and I'm just going to have a little bit of a play around thinking about how I want to include this. So the in point where it hits our frame should probably stay pretty accurate to the drawing, as well as the out point. So basically here and here should stay accurate. However, the rest of this, we can kind of morph it around however we want, as long as it returns to this correct shape at some point. So for example, if I were to bring this out and back around like so, there's no reason why we can't do that. So I'm just hitting V there to bring my selection tool and just deleting all this excess, and then I can go to my paint tool and fill this in, okay? Now, I'm going to probably say that is going to be what it's like in the middle of our frame, middle of our animation. And at the beginning, it's going to form to be the same as the original shape. So we grab our star, like so, and we fill this sucker in like that. Probably going to want it to be similar again on the last frame. So F7 there to create a new frame, new blank keyframe. And we just fill this guy in. Okay. So we've got start and end points, which are roughly the same as the original picture. So we can now hide the original picture. Might as well hide everything else as well, so don't get distracted. And we've got where we want it to be. So it's going to sort of morph and stretch out at this point. Unless we do something a bit different here, we turn on our onion skin and we have the shapes here at this point sort of stretch out as if it's made of liquid and bubble upwards. Maybe that's a better idea. So instead, what's going to happen is this is going to kind of stretch out. And then after here, at this next point, maybe here, it's going to break off. Bloop, like so. Leaving behind just a few of these and a slightly malformed original body. And then it's going to drift off and settle back in. I think that might be what we want. So that probably means that by this point here, so I'm working basically in halves and I'm getting smaller and smaller. By this point, it's probably going to be starting to form out like so. Spludging out just a little bit. We'll just quickly fill this in. Okay, so it started to pull out of its shape here. Like that. Then we've got our main keyframes. Bloop, 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 bloop. So you can kind of see where this is going to go. So now we can just do our in-betweens. So between here and here, we need a halfway point between the original shape and what is going to be our next shape. So we can drag this back so it doesn't distract us quite so much. And we can focus purely on this frame. And essentially we're going to be drawing a halfway point between that original one and the frame coming up next, which might look something like that. Yeah, about that. Let's just smooth off this little bit here. Oops. Like so. Okay. So frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, frame 4. Now that's pretty close. So what we might do is just push these two along, put another frame in here with F7, and do another smaller in between. It's not quite as formed. Yeah, I think that looks good. Okay, so it goes from here, 2, 3, 4. Then it's going to have to really push right up to this next one. Like this, maybe. Like really, really pushing up to the edge of that shape. Like so. So that when this hits we can have it stretch and really strain against it and then pop off nice and quick. So this stretch is going to go here. So that stretch is then going to really just like really straining against it a little bit there. Like so. And then this frame in between. The same sort of thing, like, so there's not a lot of movement in there as it sort of struggles to pull out, and then all of a sudden it will just pop into that new shape. Struggle, 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 pop off. There's the pop, and then we just need the fallout of that. So that fallout would be that this shape, if we drag this along to know where it's coming from, this shape starts to reform as the energy of that pops off above. This would then kind of shoot off into the distance like so, as with this. Now here's an interesting trick. We've only got a few frames left, but that's okay because we can go back to the start and start doing the fallout of this movement here, okay? And I'll show you what I mean. So we hit F7 again. This one's got to be pretty much back to normal by now. So we'll just try and draw a shape that goes halfway between each of these. Nice and smooth, nothing too crazy going on. Fill that in. Don't worry about that. That entire bit is done. But this bit, however, needs to move off just a bit better. Let's have him still be moving quite quickly. As we get to the last frame, we'll have this guy start to slow down. And this guy start to slow down as well. Now, we take these two elements by lassoing them with our L key. So that was just L to bring up lasso, drag around them. We can then copy these and go back to our first frame. Actually, let's just for reference paste them on our second frame here, because we'll be getting rid of them in a sec. Then when we go back to our first frame, we can see here. Now, in our last frame, it looked exactly the same as this. So if you think about it, this now just needs to move up a little bit. And this guy needs to move up a little bit. So they're starting to just settle in. We can now lasso and delete these because they were just for reference, and draw them moving up just a little bit again. But this time, maybe they start to lose a bit of body mass. Okay, they're just starting to settle into position. Now we're going over the frames that we just did, where this blob is still stretching out, but these ones are just slowly starting to get rid of themselves. They're just starting to deplete away. Okay. And each time they do, you just get a little bit smaller. And what this will do is create a really nice, endless loop. There you go. Okay. Now let's watch this. Turn the loop on, hit play. Loop, bloop, 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 bloop. How good that looks. So you see what we did there? We started off as if it was nothing, and then it stretched out. But it doesn't matter that we went back over and started redrawing those new bits, because it doesn't matter. It's a loop. It doesn't matter when it starts because it's an entire looping concept. Bring back in these stars again, hit play, and we're starting to create some cool motion. Looks good to me. All right, last few steps then is the sky in the background, and then we're ready to export. Thank you for sticking with me on this one. I know it's a little bit long. I do appreciate it. So let's grab these layers, drag them down to the bottom, pop them just above our color palette. Maybe we need one more layer. I'm going to call this one BG Purple, and this is literally just going to stay the same the entire time. Okay, so I might as well just grab a square for this one. Delete the stroke on the outside, so we've just got our normal square. And if I bring back in the visibility of our color palette, what I can do with this square is make it this dark purple color. I can then come along with the rest of our layers safely locked and just position this to fill our background. Like so. So what I'll do for now is I can lock and hide that, because otherwise I won't be able to see the different elements of this. So now that our purple is done, I might do some stuff on top of that purple, but the main thing I want is this morphing green background here. Okay, so we just made that star out of this color, I think. Yep, that color. So we now need this dark blue for the section behind it. Okay, and for that one, nice and simple, all we're going to do is grab our dark green, lock off everything else so we don't accidentally start messing around with it. Let's hide this guy too. Okay, and we're just going to start off again by tracing what's there. Okay, so go to our green, like so. Connect those two sections here. Gives ourselves a nice, strong shape to be getting on with. Okay, let's fill this bad boy. And voila. We can now hide this background because we don't need it anymore. And we can just start doing the same thing with this green. Now, what I want to do is just copy this. And on the last frame, maybe the frame before the last frame, I'm going to paste this in place. And then on the last frame, I'm going to onion skin it. And I'm just going to trace it again. Again, this makes sure that our last frame is similar enough to the first that the loop isn't going to be very jarring. Okay, so just come through like this. Not super worrying about being neat because it's a bit of a jaggedy animation anyway by design. So there we go. We've now got our first and last frames. If we delete that one before it, that's pretty much the same. So we can go through now and start lining up the rest of our blank keyframes. Like so. Okay, so now we just got to do the same thing for the rest of these frames. So once again, I'll fast forward and then we'll come back and do something cool in a minute. Okay, so we have now finished this section, and if we look at this in its entirety, it looks not half bad. You can see it's starting to grow out. We've got a sort of wiggling background here. The last thing that I want to do is sort of blend these two parts together. So I'm going to draw some extra lines coming out like so. This, I think, is actually maybe part of a globe in the original drawing. So we'll maybe make that green. Maybe not. Who knows? And I want to do some swirls going around the stars. So those will be two separate layers. So this one will be green lines. So we'll just call it green L. And using the same color, I'm just going to go through and do some blending. Okay, so just a little something to help bring these together a bit more. Okay, I'm just going to do that on each frame, essentially. Okay, so there's the lines on the outside of our lighter section of sky there. And the last thing I want to do is like a little dash of light dancing its way around these stars. And I'll do that without slowing down or speeding up so that you guys can see exactly what my thought process behind it is. The first thing to do is to just create a series of blank keyframes on every frame that we have here. And this one I don't need to bother making sure the first frame matches the last because they're probably both going to be empty. Okay, now let me just make visual my color palette and unlock it. And I'm going to select this lighter purple color, and then I can just hide both of those away again. We'll call this one dance or something like that, and zoom right in. And I basically want this streak of light. Maybe we'll have it start like this. Okay, to dance its way across the sky. So we need to maintain probably a roughly regular length. And I'm just moving forward two frames at a time with full stop. I'm just having my light dance its way around. As it gets to the corners, it will bunch up as it takes its time to turn. And I've already hit my limit. Okay. So you can see that we have a shape that's dancing around, but then we hit our 1 second limit. Now, here's an important factor. Just because the rest of this animation loops for 1 second, that doesn't mean that this little dancing light can't loop for 2. Very easy to do. All you need to do to make things easier is pop your dance layer on the top, unlock everything, drag all these frames out, and holding Alt, whilst covering everything apart from your dancing layer, just drag these across. This is now a 2 second looping GIF. However, everything loops for 1 second twice, whereas this dancing line will take 2 seconds to complete its loop. Simple as that. Pulls that up there, so let me fix that. There we go, so I've given myself another second of animation with this guy. And we'll just have him carry on. Oops, that's the wrong color there. So we'll grab this one again. So again, you can start to bunch up here. Then start to fly off the handle again. And begin to loop around this star like that. So we can have him wait a couple of frames. And then just before our final frame, where we come back to the beginning of the loop here, we'll just have him start to come on like so. Okay. So there's actually 1 frame or 2 frames here where he doesn't exist. Let's turn that loop on, this time dragging it up to the full 2 seconds. And let's take a look at our animation. I'm pretty happy with that. I think that looks pretty good. The only other thing we could try is adding a bit of light to the sky in the background with a bit of variation on those purples and things, but I think I'm going to leave it as it is for now. I think that's pretty happy. Okay, so let's save this off. Now, if we were to hit Control Enter, that would export our animated SWF file, which would look like this in the final thing, without the white bars. This, unfortunately, SWF no longer really supported. What you need to do is instead export this to an animated GIF. So File, Export, Animated GIF. And that will bring up this window here. Make sure that you've got GIF selected and lossy set to 0, as well as colors set to 256. Otherwise, you may not be able to match the colors that you chose in your animation. You want to make sure looping is set to forever, and you can preview this animation by clicking on the play button here. Make sure your size is set correctly as well, and you can just hit save. When you hit save, a window box will appear like so. Choose the GIF you want to save it as, and just hit yes. Then when you open that up, you'll be presented with your animated GIF that you've exported from Adobe Animate. And that is it. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. I do appreciate it. Good luck in the Big 100 project if you are doing that. And if you're not, what are you waiting for? Go and do it now. If you missed it, then I'm very sorry, but you can always do it next time because I'm tempted to do another one of these. That's it. Thanks very much for watching, everybody, and I'll see you all next time.
Remember to subscribe for more tips, tricks, and tutorials. Thanks for watching.